we're very happy to have Faith Graham here today and her granddaughter Faith to tell us all about the remarkable family of MacKerichers and the fact that that I think that we are all acquainted with MacKerricher State Park. But this will tell you the story of how that came to be. So thank you for being here. And if you have any question throughout the presentation, you may ask questions at any time. This is more of a conversation with the audience. And so if they have something they'd like to say or ask, just do so. Thank you.
Well, I just hope that I can read my notes. I have trouble with my eyesight these days, so all of this started in Scotland. It was a group of people gathered together to talk to a man by the name of Dale, and what he was doing is he was offering the Scottish people property, 200 acres, if they'd come to Canada. Now, what had happened is they had the Battle of Culloden in 1746, and the English throne really took it out on the Scots. Killed a lot of them just simply because they were there to be killed, and they would not allow them to wear their kilts any longer or to play their bagpipes. And this man wanted to have Scots around him because he was in French Canada, and this way the Scots could go there and they play their pipes and wear their kilts, and the throne couldn't get to them because it was French property. So they took, a number of them took off and went to Canada, and they couldn't go look at the land until the next spring because there was snow on the ground. Now, Donald MacKericher, who was the father of Duncan MacKericher, was on a ship that went down, and he lost all of his possessions, all of his tools. Now, most of these people that went at that time were unmarried people, and they were going over to see what they could do to have farm and then eventually have a family that had a home. And let's see, where we? So that's how my branch of the MacKerichers got to getting close to California, if you want to call it that close. When Duncan was born in Canada, talked with a Scottish burr all of his life. Mr. Cotton couldn't stand talking to him because Duncan was so slow in talking, but he never had been to Scotland. He'd lived in that area with all of the Scottish people and talked like the rest of them. And he got a letter from a friend of his by the name of Kennedy, not Kennedy, come on, I should ask him, because he knows. And he asked Duncan if he would marry Jessie. Now, all the men, I don't understand this at all. They'd have a girlfriend, had her for a long time. This was his woman, and he'd set her off someplace, and then he'd go off and work. And I guess what he was doing was making money to eventually make a home for her. So this man told Duncan to marry Jessie and come on down to California, that it was wonderful down here. Well, in order to get to California in those days, well, what Duncan did do, he did marry Jessie. They went to Montreal and had pictures taken, and then went to New York to get tickets. Now, you've got to remember, they came in 1864, and there was a war on between the states, and the only way that they could get to California was to go by water. So they had to buy tickets on steamboats, and there were a number of costs that you could, and I can't see my writing, what's the...
207, 300, 375, and 400.
Yeah, I think they did the 375. They did kind of a midway one, which would be kind of like the way the Scots would do it.
There's 200 storage.
Yeah,
For steerage.
yeah, so and then they were surrounded all the time that they were sailing to Panama. They were escorted by the Constitution, which was that large ship, and it went with them clear to Panama because the Southerners used to attack the boats, not for what was on the boats, but the mail that was on the boats, because it would have interesting things to tell them about battles and what have you. So then,
you're saying that the English people stopped the Scottish people from wearing kilts and playing bagpipes?
after the Battle of Cloddon Moor.
How long do you think that continued on?
I don't know how long it did, but because there was a long period in there where they didn't.
Well, I wanted to learn how to play the bagpipes when I was 7 years old or whenever. And my mother said, who was English, said that she enjoyed the bagpipes 2 miles over the hills, but she didn't want to hear it coming from upstairs in my bedroom. So I said, well, if I can't play bagpipes, I won't play anything. I don't play anything. It is too bad. It is too bad. Hey, but maybe it's not too late, huh?
Never too late.
Well, they went to Panama, and they had to there was no canal then, so they had to go by train across the isthmus, and then they got on the other side, and then they had to wait. And the wait was a long wait. They were waiting for another boat to come down from San Francisco area, and Jessie got the fever, and she was very ill. And but they waited for the boat to come, and when Jessie was sitting there on the trunk, and Duncan had tied the trunk on with these beautiful knots, and she was sitting on the knots, and she was not very comfortable, and she kept saying all sorts of things about the knots. And then they hauled up the first trunk on the boat of this woman's trunk, and it fell apart, and all of her goods fell into the ocean. And Jessie shut up. She didn't say another word.
Oh, it wasn't Jessie's.
No, not Jessie's
with those
trunk.
knots.
Not with those knots. But they got on the boat that was to bring them up to San Francisco, or they were thinking of going to San Jose, but the weather was so bad that they kept going up, back and forth, and trying to decide where they were going to get off. And eventually what happened, and I can remember my father telling me the story when I was a youngster about his grandmother. She was a great one for prayer. And she was ill as she was. She got on the deck and she prayed, "Come on, this is enough." And they did. The weather calmed down, and they guess where they got off? In Mendocino. Yes, they got off in Mendocino, and then they came up to Casper because they had friends in Casper. There was a. Does anybody know there was a McCollum in Casper? They're friends that there was the Gordons was the man that sent him the letter, and there was a Duncan MacKericher. Now, what was the MacKericher here?
It's a different family.
Yeah, is it a different family?
Because the one here was Alex MacKericher.
That's what I wanted to know, because I didn't have that. So, but they were all from Canada. Do you know whether Alex MacKericher was from Canada?
Yeah, I think he was.
Okay, that's then probably the same family. And there was also a...
Daisy married Duncan MacKericher?
Alex.
Was it Alex?
There's a Campbell.
That's right, it was Alex.
And Ross.
And Ross.
Reverend John.
Well, that was Ross. That was the minister that built the church.
And there's a John Ross who's alive today from that family and lives on Little River Airport Road.
Yeah. They were all good friends. They all grew up pretty much within 10 miles of each other in Canada. They were all good friends before they came out here. The Rosses, the MacKerichers, the McCalls, and the Jeffersons. Jeffersons, my great-grandparents.
Well, the MacKerricher stayed around, and well, she was still ill. She was still recovering from the fever, and that was the fever that they got when they built the canal.
Yellow malaria.
Yeah.
Yellow.
They just called it the fever.
Oh, okay, yellow fever.
Didn't one of the Kelly brothers die of that fever crossing the Panama Canal?
Probably.
I believe so.
If you got bitten by the mosquito, I guess that's what happened. And he decided to work at the Casper mill for 2 years. And do you know how long Gordon owned the house there, the Jug Handle Farms?
My great-grandfather came out in 1867. I think he probably owned it for about 2 years. Before that's probably 1865.
Because from what I know, Gordon built it and started it in '63, and then Jefferson,
So earlier.
finished it off.
They didn't get their homestead papers completed until they had citizenship. So they both worked on citizenship at the same time. And then we bought it out in 1875.
Because the thing of it was, they stayed with someone, and I wondered if they stayed there at the Jug Handle Farm. Because you know where I live,
Yeah.
just up the road from it. And I never intended to live here. It's not that I didn't want to, it's just nothing, it never occurred to me. I came a lot of times here.
There's a guy with a question
Where?
in the back. She's
I don't see very well, so put your hand up.
For the gentleman who was just speaking, you said they were working on citizenship for 2 years before they got their homestead papers. Was that for a definite homestead and the government held it for them, or was that till they could even file first
They
time?
filed for homestead, then they had to prove the homestead, but they couldn't actually finalize it till they had citizenship. And to tell you the truth, I forget when they became citizens, but I think about 1870.
So it wasn't
then
like
they
really rushed, you had like 2-year lag and there'd still be land left, correct?
Yeah. I didn't hear that too well.
They said it wasn't rushed, that you could have a 2-year lag and there still be land, but
I think so.
Well, with Duncan, what he did, after 2 years at the mill, they decided that they needed somebody new at the rancheria at Kibasilla, and he was offered the job, and he said he was taking it because at that time, the white men, if they had any power at all, and control over the Indians, they would put the children into slavery, put the women into slavery, and put the men into slavery because they made money off of it. And Duncan says, I don't want to do this. I want to see that they are able to live like we do. And he was very well liked by the Indians, and of course his family went with him. And Duncan had a nice voice, a nice singing voice, and he carried a pitch pipe in his pocket so he could keep a good tune. And the Indians really enjoyed that, the singing that he did. And all I know is he weighed 134 pounds when he left Canada, but I don't know how tall he was. And I've never seen anything that has said how tall. But he also had an occurrence to encounter a white man there was a young man by the name of Jim that was an Indian and worked with the cattle, and that's one of the things they did is they got the wild cattle and turned them into milk cows, and of course if they were ladies, and and this young man was very good at using the lasso and what have you, but he had a very nice looking wife. And one of the things that I became aware of in doing this research that I've been doing is that California didn't get big for a long time, and there weren't a lot of women out in California. And so the men were always looking for women, and if a pretty Indian girl could come along, then she was fair game. And these Indians, Duncan followed this young man to this spot in a clearing, and here we are, all these Indians surrounding a white man, and this white man was the one that was going after this young woman. And Duncan told him he put the white man on one side and the Indians on the other side, and then he told the white man that if he bothered that girl or any other Indian girl again, that he would let the Indians take care of it. Mm-hmm. So he never had any more trouble. And then his wife did inoculate the Indians for smallpox and for typhoid, so they wouldn't have the problem that they had in the past. And let's see if I'm doing here. I'm having terrible time with the light.
You need a bit of light.
Yeah.
Is there a lamp anywhere?
There was one we got.
We're done with that card.
Okay.
See if we can find it. That's the Rancho story of Jim.
Yeah, I just already told you.
With Indians, white man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a flashlight.
That's his trip to Eureka.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, the trip to Eureka, that was interesting. For one thing, no, it's not.
No, they're looking for a lamp, Faith. Why don't
Okay.
you wait for a second? Maybe they'll find you a lamp. Anyway, Duncan sounds like he was a man who was ahead of his time. Or
Wasn't
maybe
he?
he was what we need as an example even to today.
Well, it even goes further. When he left the Rancheria, the government decided all this land was going to be taken over by the white man, and they're going to send all of these Indians that were raised on the coast to Covelo. And that was a terrible place to send them.
China.
I know. And what he did is he needed, when he got to Ranch, and I'm jumping ahead, when he got I think they're going to get a lamp, and that will be better.
It talks about the horseback to file the papers.
Yeah, well, I think what I should do is, I'm getting nervous now, so.
Why don't you take a break? Drink some water.
Oh, I've got some water. I've got some water here.
You're not on a time schedule here. We'll stay as long as you will.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
I just would like to share that I used to go to Faith for massage, and she saved my life with her wonderful healing hands. And I did that for a number of years until she had to retire. And I was very sad that you had to retire, but I'm so glad to see you.
Well, you're going to have the chair so it's not in front of her.
Yeah.
You can hand me that stuff, Grandma.
Thank you. There's a receipt for something you bought.
I don't know where that came from.
Old receipt, 95. If I show a picture of Duncan and Jessie.
Which one is that? Yeah, nice
Oh,
one.
thank you.
I don't know if you can see, but this is a picture of Duncan and one of Jessie.
Wow. Fabulous portraits.
And she had very blue eyes. They said they were
Do we
beautiful.
put them together? You got them? Okay.
Up and look at them later.
But anyway, the property came up for sale, and I think that there were a number of people that wanted the land because it was the nicest piece of land along the coast. And in order to get the property, he had to go up to Eureka. There were no roads to Eureka. All you did was, they had what they called the track, which was did somebody put their hand up? No.
They'll holler if they need it.
Yeah, that's it. But anyway, he started out with a horse, and his feet went up to Eureka's. Now, part of the time he could ride horseback, but part of the time he had to walk. Some of the times he went down to the ocean to walk. And he had extra supplies that he buried on the way going, and when he got back to use them, somebody had unburied them, you know. Yeah, so he didn't do well on that, but he did get the property fixed so that he could get it. But then somebody filed against him, and what they could do is say that there were minerals on the property, you know, gold and oil. Well, that was silly, but he had to go to San Francisco and Washington to clear that up, and it took, of course, all of that took time and money. But eventually they did get to go to the ranch, and he promised Jessie that he would build her a 4-room house. That would be the start. And so off they go, and Samuel Kennedy comes down from Canada to help him. That was a nephew. And he built him a number of buildings. He had to have buildings for the potatoes, and also one for the horses. He raised Percherons, which are those big horses, and he loved his horses. Every night before he went to bed, he'd go out and give them a carrot from the garden, and also there was a lot of clearing to be done. There were a lot of large trees on the property then, and he wanted to get it clear so he could plant vegetables and what have you. And so he invited the Indians to come and live on his land. And he would pay them to clear the land, and that's what he did. And it must have been a shock to the Indians after some of the treatment that they had had. And the other thing that I found out is that the lagoon, and I refuse to call it a lake, it was always called the lagoon. And it was a holy place. The Indians came there to celebrate that, and I have not found out what the holiness was, but it was a holy place. And when the MacKerrichers took the property over, the Indians were allowed to come and do their celebrations and their dances. And I thought that was pretty good for a Baptist, because they were very generous. And my father told me a story about a man that worked for his grandfather. And he said that they wanted to get Henry away from MacKerricher because he was such a good worker. And Henry would say, MacKerricher paid me $5 a day, bet you my life. And of course nobody got $5 a day in those days. But that's what he kept saying. But, and it was a fortunate thing for me that my father, he had a thing about his family, and we always came to visit, and which was always interesting. But then it stopped because the war came along and there was gas rationing, so we couldn't come and visit. And then my father died young, and so that stopped the visiting. But then I had a husband that liked the ocean, and he also worked with the Scouts, and he had an explorer group, and he taught them to swim if they couldn't swim, and he taught them to dive so they could come over and go abaloning and could go fishing. And I told them that I would come with them and do the cooking, but I would not do the KP. And I would get out of the way with the girls, and so that the boys could do what they needed to do. And he told me, well, he was going down to Salt Point. I said, what do you mean Salt Point? That's not the ocean. You want to go? If you want the ocean, you go to Fort Bragg. And so off we go, and then I looked up a cousin that was left here, and Roy kept saying how much he loved it here, and she said, well, why don't you move over here? And we couldn't afford to have a home there and one here. So guess what? 39 years ago, we moved here, and it has been wonderful, because This is one place you can go outside the door and you can breathe. And I took a trip over the hill the other day to Santa Rosa, and halfway over there I looked and I could see all this stuff descending, you know, and it was smog, you know, and here we are. It's just wonderful. Now I better get back to...
You're done with that one.
Okay.
That's going to the ranch.
Well, the other thing is there weren't any tools. You couldn't go down to the store and buy tools. They weren't available at that time. We'd had a war, and it wasn't over quite yet, and he needed supplies for that sort in order to build up the ranch. They had a junk pile at the rancheria, and he was allowed to take tools from it. I can't figure out why he was allowed, because the man that was in charge of it then, all of that belonged to the government. And
That was beside the point.
and he charged Duncan for the junk tools. And that's how he was able to work. But he had been so used to doing that sort of thing, I guess it didn't really matter. Let's see here.
I think you've done most of that one.
Okay, thank you. Now you see why you're here?
That's the Holy Land one.
Hmm?
That was the Holy Land. You've already done that
Okay.
one. And that's the lumber
Oh, yes.
or something
The-
point.
Yeah, the lumber. In 1883. And here lies something that probably would make all of you interested. Duncan gave a right-of-way to Jefferson and Kennedy to go out to the point. And I looked up the material on that, and it says that there was this right-of-way for Jefferson and Kennedy, and the next paragraph says, and to the general public to be used as a roadway. And they specify wagons. Now, whether that would be something, I don't think they can ever close that road to the public. Because according to what I've been told, that in order to do it, you have to go into a court of law, and I don't think that the state wants to do that.
Lisa Midland.
Yeah.
I can add to that road, it's used by the public. I don't remember the year, but it was quite a while ago when KDAC radio station, they had a talk show run by Eloise Keller, and word could spread fast on the coast here through that program. And twice in my memory, state parks have tried to close that road. And the first time the news went out before it hit the paper, you know, if news breaks on Monday, you have to wait till Thursday to read it in the paper. Well, by way of the radio, the word was leaked that they were going to block the road and charge admission to park and visit the point and park. And the outcry was unbelievable, and it was stopped, so it's still open to the public. But it happened a second time, I can't remember how many years later, and the last time, if this is true the way I've heard it, there are, I think, 3 houses along Mill Creek Drive at the park, and 2 of them were offered, as I remember, $200 each to give up their right-of-way to use that road, and 2 of them gave in, but the other didn't. So, in my opinion, it still hangs by a thread to some degree. But it is true that it was given for the public to use.
I didn't realize how smart Duncan was until he wrote that to and to the general public, because that's what he inserted in it.
I think how long ago that was.
It was April 12th, 1883.
Yeah, well, this was probably in, I'm guessing, the late 1970s, 80s, that It was.
And I was on the beach one day, and I was talking to a lady that had just come over from Yuba City, and she was there because she had 2 grandchildren that wanted to go to the ocean. Now, she said I could afford the car trip over with the gas, but she said I could not afford to pay for any money for the kids so they could come to, and the kids were having a wonderful time on the beach.
I think that's still true for a lot of people who live here who can't go, frequently to the other local parks like we can to MacKerricher.
And they didn't give the property to the state. The first time I met one of the rangers out there, he was giving his talk, and I waited until he got through, and I went up to him and I said, I have only one thing to tell you that's wrong. I said, they didn't give the property to the state, and the state was slowing and paying for it. And the Cottons were the ones that were able to buy the land. And because Duncan didn't give anything away.
You knew the value of it.
Because I've realized that through the whole thing. Yes?
Question. Well, I don't know what this is out of your time sequence here, but at what time did Union Lumber Company acquire the right-of-way for the railroad to the ranch?
Is that on that sheet? Because she's got something that I'm going to have her read. I'm sure glad I decided you were going to read it.
Do you want me to read it now?
Yeah, go ahead and read it
Okay,
now.
we'll see if it's in this. It's the history of Laguna Ranch. It was a part of Mendocino Indian Reservation. When the reservation was dissolved in 1867, the lands of the reservation were opened up for settlement and could be taken up as claims or purchased for $1.25 an acre.
Wow.
The first part of the ranch was obtained from the United States by Duncan MacKericher. President's Grant's letter patented Duncan MacKericher for land in California on August 1st, 1872. Described as follows to wit: in the district of land subject to sale at Humboldt County, California, containing 616.67 acres. On September 21st, 1872, he purchased an additional 300 acres from E.J. Whipple for the sum of $375. This comprised the lands of Laguna Ranch. On September 12, 1872, he sold to Gustav Peterson 280 acres from the ranch for $1,720. Other parcels were sold from the ranch, which created the village of Laguna. On August 3, 1882, the first parcel was sold to David Vickery for $250. On September 5, 1882, he sold a parcel to Fred A. Sackett and Andrew Newman for $250. They built a store on this lot. On October 11, 1882, he sold a lot to Francis J. Bacon for $250. And on November 10, 1882, he sold a lot to Frank Fritchie, sorry for the pronunciation. What is it?
Yeah, Fritchie.
Fritchie, for $250. And then let's see, dated March 21st, 1883, he granted to Alexander Jefferson and Samuel Kennedy a right-of-way across his lands for a wagon road to Laguna Point. Jefferson and Kennedy were granted a franchise to build a wharf and operate a shipping business. He sold many other lots between 1880 and 1900, thus creating the village of Laguna. On January 17, 1883, the U.S. Postal Department established a post office of Canuck for the village of Laguna, and on March 4, 1883, changed the post office to Cleone, and the post office was disconnected in 1908. On May 28, 1887, he sold the lands to Little Valley Lumber Company of Laguna Creek for a mill site and granted them the right-of-ways down Laguna Wharf. Duncan MacKericher farmed the ranch up to 1900 when he rented it to his son Russell, who farmed it up to 1907. From then, there were many renters. On October 17, 1911, he sold an interest to his son-in-law, Joel S. Cotton, and his heirs. On October 7, 1913, he sold all of his interest to Mr. Cotton and his heirs. April 5, 1922, Frank Hyman purchased 160 acres east of the highway. In 1950, the state of California purchased 280 acres of the ranch for a state park, creating the MacKerricher State Park. And in 1951, Frank Hyman purchased the remaining 90 acres.
It doesn't mention how the right-of-way got through there.
No.
Yes.
Does it?
Yeah,
Unless that was Little Valley, were they heirs to Little
Yes,
Valley
yes.
Lumber Company?
yeah, and that was May 28, 1887. They sold the lands to the Little Valley Lumber Company on Laguna Creek and granted them the right of way for the Laguna Wharf.
Well, I talked to an elderly gentleman, and he turned out, he was a client. And he got to telling me when they pulled the ties out of the roadway so that they could have a truckway, and they didn't do a very good job of pulling those large spikes out, and so the trucks would be going along, and all of a sudden, bang! And that happened quite often. So it was not an easy change. I have a couple here things, if I can get them out of my card and my eyes.
Mrs. Gordon's, is it hat
Yeah,
box?
in Mrs. Gordon's hat box. She used to come visit Jessie, and she'd carry her hat box with her. She'd go into the bedroom, and she'd take out the hat that she rode in, and all the dust was on it, and take out this nice new hat and put it on her head, and then go in the other room, and they'd sit and have tea. And it was really very nice.
And that talks about the horses, and it shows when they died.
Yeah, that's not, but the ranch, when they got to the ranch, of course, they had to make some money, and he was able, with clearing out the land, and some of the trees they had to use dynamite on in order to get the trees out. And he had a garden, he raised vegetables and what have you, and he hauled potatoes to Mendocino, and in sacks, and he hauled butter in barrels to Mendocino. And do you realize how far that is? When if you're using a wagon or you're on foot? Because sometimes they did it on foot. You'd get all the kids, there were 7 of them, 6 at the end, and they'd get to Pudding Creek, no bridge, and the tide would come in, so if it come too high, then they couldn't do anything about it. They just had to wait until the tide would go out. And so, but that is how they raised a lot of their money, was just by, the day started at 4 o'clock. And Jessie would get up and milk the cows and feed the calves, and then Duncan would run around after the bald-heeled cows, because they'd come down to visit all the stuff that Duncan had planted, not necessarily for cows, but it tasted pretty good. So he had some sort of a ratchet thing that I think they have them on Halloween now, and he chased the cows, the bald-heeled cows away.
Faith, when he bought that land, did it have redwood trees on it?
I think so, because I know there was a large tree left, and when Great Aunt Edith was getting older, he said, "I'm saving that tree for you so we could have some furniture made out of it," and it was a large tree. So there had to be redwood. So one of the things that I recognized, that because Jefferson had land here in the area of Jughandle, and then he went north, right?
Newport.
And what they did is they went to another fresh place where they could take down the timber. And San Francisco was very obliging. It was always burning down. And they needed to have timber to rebuild it. And that was one of the things that kept them going. See how I can... Yes?
Where was the house he built relative to Mill Creek itself? And the house?
In order to get to it, you didn't go in and I've never been able to figure out why the state wanted to have the opening to the park down like this, so the first rain you have, you can't go through it at all. Because the house you went to it from Mill Creek down across. Now there is a picture someplace of the there's the one that they built a nice house in town, But there's a, where's that, inside?
Got 'em.
So it was east of the highway then, the existing highway?
Is that the one?
No, but there's a better picture.
Is it
Did you get
one towards
this one?
this way?
No, there's a picture of
Yeah, I've seen it. 1 second. Let me look.
This one?
It's probably in these. It's a smaller picture, I think.
it's a smaller picture.
'Cause that was
With the house in
That
town?
was Mill Creek.
No, that's just Mill Creek.
One in town.
That's the one that they built when they retired.
This is one of the
No,
back
that-
side of it.
That's the, yeah, there's a there's a picture of it, but,
This is, right?
yeah, well, that's, does it say?
Laguna Ranch, Cleone, front door, south side.
There's one, where is it?
We didn't put it up already. And this is the potato shed.
The one?
This is the one in town.
That's one in town, let's
Yeah,
see.
that's the townhouse. 1 second.
Because it was a pretty good sized house. And they didn't have two-story house, but the boys slept in the attic.
And it's not one we put up already?
I don't know what, because I didn't go over there and look.
Is it with the picnic? There's one at the front of the house, but it's not very good. Oops. Is that that's the townhouse,
That's
right?
town.
This is the townhouse. It's still there.
Whereabouts
Yeah,
is that
that's-
located?
That's right across from Cotton Auditorium. And it's a wonderful house. When I first walked into it and went up the stairs, it was built just for me. I'm short, right? And I went up the stairs and went to the linen closet, and the knobs were just for me. And then I went downstairs in the kitchen, and they had a pantry, and I went up to where you wash the dishes, and it was just for me. You know?
Well, speaking of the doorknobs, people always ask why our doorknobs are so low, you know, on the door here at the Kelly house. And why is that? Is that the way they always built them because people were not that tall?
No, it would depend on the people in the house.
So they would place them not as after a standard measure, but after the people. Okay.
Yeah, the same way with the washing dishes, you know. You yeah,
Yeah, of course.
and it was just perfect.
That one with the sweet peas, and then the potato shed, and then just this one. Is that the one you're...
No, there's, wait a minute.
These are the three of the house.
I can see the picture. Where is it?
That's the house right there.
I know that's the end of it, but there's one of the house.
Is it one lane down there, Lisa?
Oh, and Jessie used to feed everybody that came to the house. And can you imagine fresh bread, fresh butter, homemade jam,
Is this it?
and a
the
cup of
horses.
tea? Yeah, that's the one that's the big one too.
Yeah. There is one of the ranch up there. Oops.
No, that's not the ranch.
That's not the ranch?
No,
Okay. The horses, that's not?
Did they grow their own wheat?
That wheat is what Duncan was supposed to help the Indians grow, because the Scots are supposed to be great wheat growers.
That's it.
And I don't know whether they did grow any out there. But he ran the first mowing machine north of Point Reno. And I would assume that he would do that because of the, you know, the cattle and what have you that he had. He cut to mow the hay down. And what else? There was something else I was...
Did you
Apple
ever
trees
say
and
how they
apple
got the
trees.
cattle, the first cattle there?
They were wild cattle.
Wild?
Wild cattle left over from somebody before, because they had them out there at Kipasila. And that was true of a lot of places, and if you let the cattle go, I guess they would
Survive.
do what was natural, and they'd end up having bigger herds of cattle. And they had a dairy out there at the ranch for a long time, and when Duncan moved into town, his son Russell ran the ranch, and he did have a dairy. I don't know how they delivered milk, though. That's the thing that bothered me.
Maybe they made a lot of it into butter if they sold a lot of butter.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Feed
Well,
the
they had a factory.
calves the light milk.
A lot of times they did, like town of Cotto over there from when it was there to go before there was actually even a stage road. There was a guy that had a pack train and with pack saddles on mules, and he had big stirrups built like big hoops, and they would put the milk cans in them, and he would leave and go in the nighttime when it was cool in the summer to go to Sherwood, and then they had a wagon road from Sherwood into Willits and points beyond, and that's how they actually delivered milk over the hill over there. And I would assume they probably done the same thing here.
Was the house close to where the ranger station is now, the ranger's house is?
Yeah, because it's like it faced the little creek, and it wasn't very far from that.
Yeah, it's really close to where the rangers' homes are now, the trailers for the rangers at the park.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know when I was a kid, some of the apple trees were still out there. I think they've since cut them down.
Are the apple trees still?
There
There's still a couple. There's a couple.
Yeah.
Because there was one of the, what do they call them, that has a trailer there as you get into the park, and they're supposed to be, you can go over and talk to them. You know, they're not rangers.
The park host.
The host.
Thank you. Camp host?
Park host, that's us. The two of us.
Are you?
Yeah, he's summertime and wintertime.
Well, because they were the ones that showed me where all the apple trees were.
You
In
can
fact,
see them back there.
yeah, and there was one of the gals that used to make applesauce out of it. And was there a question?
One more, please. I'm trying to understand or visualize this Indian reservation and what its extent was. You said the MacKericher holdings were 600 and some odd acres originally, and then added 300 he purchased from, I forget who.
Whipple. They purchased them from Whipple?
And that was
Yeah.
that was adjacent or abutting pieces. And was that part of the Indian reservation or all of it?
Oh, yeah.
Not all of it.
Went from Noyo River up to 10 Mile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so it was the whole reservation was everything from the Noyo River north to 10 Mile?
Mm-hmm.
It even went south of the Noyo a little
How
bit.
many acres did he have at the most? At the,
Well, supposedly he had about 1,200 acres
At one time.
at the turn of the century.
Todd's Point is actually part of the original reservation.
Which is?
Todd's Point,
So it goes south of.
right there where the cliff house is. All that whole little piece right out there was actually a lot of the living quarters of Todd's Point is.
So all the development of the lumber industry and all that down in Noyo Harbor, the old plumber and white mill, that's all after this reservation has been opened up for purchase. So then it wasn't confined to 160 acre pieces like in Homestead, or was it? Because you mentioned 600 acres there.
If you bought it for cash, you could buy it, I assume, at one time. But if you staked a claim and proved on it, then it was only 160 acres.
I see.
yeah, because I think he got some at first, right? And then he bought some.
Well, what he did is he
Homestead?
borrowed money from the bank and he paid 18% on it. And everybody, I've had some of the Indian people tell me that, they thought it was pretty awful that MacKerricher bought the land for $1.25 an acre. But a lot of the extra property that he bought, he paid 18% on it. And that's why he was always running around. There was a story of a bank payment coming due, and Jessie she got very upset because she was always worried about those things. They had to be taken care of now. And so, as usual, she got down and on her knees because this is what she believed in doing. And this man shows up at the door, and they had a piece of property that they had sold, and someone had done improvements on it and then decided they couldn't pay for it, and they had left. And this man says, in a dream, I saw this property, and he described this piece of property perfectly to her. And he bought and paid cash for that land at that time. And another story that I started to say that she always fed everybody that came to the door. There was one gentleman that kept coming, and I don't know, he came quite often, so she thought, well, she'd try something and see what would happen. So instead of feeding him right away, she got her Bible out. And she started reading, and she kept reading, and he never came back. So she learned that one. Yes.
And she also had Sunday school classes.
Oh yes, she probably did that for her own children because she had Sunday school classes for them. And of course, when they did move into town, she became a member of the board, which I didn't think they let women do that. But she was quite a lady but Duncan wanted a lot more education, especially out in the country, and he kept pushing for that, but she kept pushing for temperance. I don't know who in the family drank a lot, but she sure was against alcohol. And but then when she got to town, of course, there were yes, what was that?
I said, maybe the Kennedys.
Well, that's another thing. Yeah, what was that in the back?
What question? The 6 children?
They had 7, but the 7th child, they sent him over to Ukiah to go to high school. They didn't have a high school here. And he got typhoid and died. And he was the strongest child. They were really very athletic. He never opened a gate. He always jumped over it. You know, and so now what did you, and the children?
What, was there a doctor on the coast at the time, or was it by midwife?
He was in Ukiah.
No, when she gave birth to
gave birth?
7 children.
That, you know, that she did childbirthing in the Rancheria, but they didn't say anything about what she did. You know, I have no idea.
What's the time span?
Because
why don't you go ahead and give she has the dates of birth and stuff on this card.
Oh, okay.
Edwin Daniel.
Edwin Daniel, that was my grandfather.
November 2nd, 1865.
Why don't you do it? You can see it better than I can.
Edwin Daniel, which is her grandfather, was born November 2nd, 1865 in Casper. Margaret Stewart was born March 1867 in Casper. Miriam Jean, August 2nd, 1869 in Kibosila. William, February 10th, 1873 in Cleone. And Russell was born November 1870 in Cleone. Evelyn Marie, May 9th, 1875. And Edith Marie was born May 9th, 1875. Twins?
Mm-mm.
No? Same date. Something's not right. You gave them the same birthday, so.
Oh, I did, but I was getting down to the edge of the paper.
Yeah. So Edith's younger. She wasn't born in 1875. Those are the dates of the children. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 were born in Cleone.
Well, they left Canada in 64, and she had my grandfather in 65.
And she was pregnant with him when she got the fever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No.
is he the only surviving male?
Oh no, there was Russell and
Yep, the card's back here. So
It seemed like there were a lot of girl names that I
Yes.
was hearing.
There, it seems to me
Yeah.
that,
there
that,
were 3
that,
boys.
that's the way it was, though, in pioneer life, that there were more females than there were males.
3 boys and 4 girls.
Oh, okay.
So there were still
Just
2
wasn't
boys
picking
left.
up on- Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is a picture of, is it William that passed away?
Mhm.
There is a picture of William set up on the, it's laying down flat though, on the table if you want to look at it afterwards.
Did I get it all?
Yeah, this is a new one. This is about Samuel Kennedy coming down from Canada to help.
Oh yeah, that's when he built that house, but you might go out to Cleone and take a look at that yellow house that says 1883. Yeah, that's the one he built. That's the only remaining piece of, for one thing, I think the house out at the ranch, I think it burned down. So,
How are you holding out, Faith?
I'm falling apart. I can't read my cards.
Doing wonderful.
Yes, you're doing a great job.
Enjoying it.
Ugh.
I'll give you notes to get you started.
Yes.
Yes, can you talk about how you spell MacKerricher?
Now, you're talking to somebody that's a dissident, you know. It's,
Well, that's why I want to know.
Well, my father, I was born with the way it is on the state park. My father went to Canada in the 30s, and I had a picture, and I cannot find it, it slipped away, of Donald MacKericher's gravestone. And it's capital MC, capital K-E-R-I-C-H-E-R. Now, there are a lot of MacKerichers in Canada that spell it other ways. But if you had all the MacKerichers out at the park that is in Canada, you'd never get your mail. Because it would go to some other guy, spelled the same way that yours is spelled. And I think that that's what happened. I think that somebody would be, because there were so many MacKerichers, that they began to change the spelling of the names. But that's the way Donald spelled it. And the other thing that I don't like what the state did, they always, the point is called Laguna Point. And the dictionary says that you can call it either a lagoon or a lake, but it was always a lagoon. And the Indians call it the Lake of the Big Deer, or the Lagoon of the Big Deer. Now, tell me, what is the big deer? Is that
Elk.
elk? Tulio?
Well, imagine, yeah, there was a lot of elk in this country in which they finally started reestablishing.
Because that's what the Indians called it. And the Indians that were here were called ocean people. And I can't pronounce the name. Yes?
So was there ocean water intrusion into what we know now as Lake Cleone? Is that the lagoon you're talking about?
Yep.
But you know, they never had any problems with the water, with the intrusion. I don't know why that's, is there a problem? Do you know?
Just the only intrusion they get in the winter time is when the waves come over the top of the old road.
Well,
It's where the road is broken and the waves will come in. That's the only intrusion they're getting.
Well,
But it's dammed somewhat too.
long ago, it must have been more open to the ocean.
well, one of the things, yeah, but one of the things that they have done is there was no, they changed the road going out there. There used to be pure water going through, and now they've got a road that impedes it from going out like it should. And the other thing is when they worked on the highway several years ago, I don't know how long ago it was, they did something to it so there's not as much water coming through. Is it Mill Creek that's coming through?
Oh, it's because they've allowed the willows to grow up in that creek, and it's just jammed now with vegetation. I've been wondering, watching it year after year, why that's allowed, because at one time I forget which agencies would go into all the creeks along the coast here to clear them of willows and shrubbery so there would be better flow in the winter. And now there are spots along Highway 1 that just flood because they're not keeping them open anymore. Especially up near Little Valley. It's an environmental thing.
To see.
That's okay. Well, the next thing you had was Samuel Kennedy came down from Canada to help build the ranch.
Yeah, well, he did, and I took care of that. I already got through that.
You're done with this one?
Yeah.
Samuel had
I think I think I'm through.
dinner time, map on the wall.
What?
Says dinner time, map on wall.
Oh!
Time to talk
Yeah,
about
I may have stretched my point, though. They're getting a little rested. Duncan had a habit of whenever he would get mail, he'd get a newspaper, and up on the wall would go the map for the area that the newspaper was talking about. And then everybody at the dinner table had to talk about what was in that newspaper. And Jessie used to say that if he hadn't married, he probably would be traveling all over the world. But she did not care for the map on the wall.
That's the sale of the property.
Yeah.
Charlie went to.
Yeah, I think
That's it. Yeah. And she does have a picture of the original store that they had in town that her grandfather ran. And this was on Franklin and Laurel.
Is that Sears?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that burnt down in 1906 during the earthquake. And then this is a picture of the new market, which is across the street, the outside of it. And then this is a picture of the inside of it. And we'll have those out and you can look at them. Get it?
Well, we thank you so much for being here, and if there's anybody that wants to talk about anything that they've discussed today, well, I'm sure that Faith will oblige afterwards.
As long as I don't have to read it.
Yeah. And we certainly thank you for being here, and this has been a wonderful talk, and we appreciate Faith and Faith being here so very much.